Hey, Lioness, welcome to the show, Lioness Conversations, where we help women be brave, to lead with confidence and joy, and to find your path to the most meaningful work of your life. I'm your host, Jen Porter, leadership and empowerment coach for ambitious and heart centered women who are ready to change the world. You can find out more at jenportercoach.com. You can join the Lioness community, and you can also nominate someone else or yourself for this podcast through the website. Today, we have a very special guest, Michelle Konson. Michelle is a relentless pursuer of truth and a proud South African who helps women find hope and redemption by embracing the fullness of their stories. Through her decades of experience as a writer, speaker, mentor, attorney, and mom, she encourages those who feel it's too late for redemption and to see the beauty in their own flawed journeys. She's a dedicated volunteer and advocate for MomCo and Love USA, a nonprofit benefiting AIDS orphans in Southern Africa. And she is my dear friend. Michelle, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jan. It's such a joy to be here. Just really so grateful to be here and to just be part of what you're doing. It's been a joy to watch, your journey over the years since we met. What was it? Almost 10 years ago now
Yes.
at the Allender Center Story Workshop in Denver.
Yes.
And yeah, we met there, both living in Northern Virginia at the time, and, came back and grew our friendship. And it's just been an honor to watch you as you've taken your journey on so beautifully and to where you are now.
I mean, we never could have imagined. I was reflecting on that this morning as I was just imagining this conversation that we were going to have. And you're right. I mean, we met in Denver and we realized that we both lived outside of DC in Northern Virginia. And it was like, really? Because we connected. And then to know that we could continue that relationship, not just virtually, but also in person, at least for the time that I lived there. And then I was thinking this morning, wow, you were there at the beginning of my own journey of certainly uncovering my own story. The year that we met, I call the year of rage. So I was undone and I didn't know what to do with all of it. And that's the year that we met. But then the next year, Ken and I are, dating and thinking about getting married and trying to untangle all of my stuff to be prepared for a healthy relationship, and my coaching business that I launched in 2017. And I thought, wow, we intersected at this really interesting time in our lives. And then what you've been able to do since then is so remarkable. And it's thinking about the name of, what I do on this podcast is telling the stories. And that's literally what brought us together was
Yeah.
discovering our own story through the story workshop at the Allender Center, Dan Allender.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I had
Well,
no idea. I think when I signed up for it, right, I knew that I was looking for more. I knew I was looking for healing.
yeah.
And I was so desperate at the time to find, just wholeness and goodness. And, I didn't really know what the story workshop was. It sounded great in the description, and I'd heard Dan speak, and he'd really, connected with, where I was in my life. And so I was like, I have to go to this. But again, also really not knowing, we had to write a childhood story, um, to work through during the workshop. And I'm like, well, why, what purpose is this? I have a really traumatic story from when I'm 17. Can I do that? And they're like, no, it needs to be younger. And I'm like, no, that was my most traumatic. They're really making a mistake by making me not work through that. And yet, now that I'm here almost 10 years later, I can tell, A, why that childhood story was so important, but B, just the whole process of us going back to our childhood woundings, right? Why that is so important. And that we don't really know that we need to do that until somebody points us in that direction.
What do you think opened up for you as a result of diving into your story in that way?
I think I started seeing things that I'd never seen before. And I started seeing them with other people mirroring back what I was telling them, right? Because we all have our narratives, we all have our stories that we tell ourselves. That's part of being human, right? We're story beings, but we also make stories to make sense, right? And to survive. And I think I had my own stories, but once we got to the workshop and then had to relay this childhood story of ours to other people, and for other people to mirror back to me, Michelle, that was crazy. That was not normal. That was not right. That was not good. If we be like, well, I had to really work hard to try and find one, right? To find a childhood story that even in my mind remarkably bore like elements of trauma, because I was like, well, there really aren't any, right? And so, I picked one that seemed somehow benign. But then when I shared it and I started hearing other people, empathetic listeners, replaying to me what I had just said to them, I was like, oh my goodness, my eyes were just opened to the possibility of there is just so much here that is uncovered, that needs to be uncovered, that's covered, that's been hidden, that I need to work through. And, and then you start with that one story, and then that story links to another story and links to another story. And then, these stories just start coming back, right? And we know from neuroscience that our bodies fragment, right? That's a survival mechanism, right? We fragment to survive because we can't contain and hold the whole trauma of some of these stories. But then as we get older and we start looking back and start trying to piece together, as we remember one fragment, we then are reminded of another and another. It's like breadcrumbs. Um,
It's interesting that the impact of telling our story or even discovering our story for the first time with others.
mhm,
Because you're right, we have our own reflection of memory, how we
mhm.
remember it. I mean, I would say that every woman that I talk to minimizes their story.
Yeah. Yeah. I think again, that's how we're surviving. That's also how we're conditioned, right? We're told, just brush it off. That's not a big deal. Just move
Right.
on. Just be strong. Don't cry. Don't fret over that. Leave it in the past. Like we're told these things,
Yeah,
right?
don't talk about it.
Right. Right. And it's years and years of hearing that. And eventually we're like, oh, okay. Yeah, that's right. And it becomes a lived experience for us. But, Dr. Kurt Thompson is huge on the power of telling our story to empathetic listeners and how, they can then mirror parts of our story back to us. And if they are regulated and they can feel their emotions by them doing that, it helps us to do the same, right? And so, that's one of the biggest takeaways I've had on story work is that we cannot do this work alone. We were created by a triune God. And so we were never meant to do any part of our story alone. We were
Mhm.
always meant to do it in community. But our society, I think, pushes us to isolation, right? You're independent, you're strong, you can do it all. Just, you can do whatever you want and you don't need others, right? But that's a lie, I believe. And we also don't want to be needy, right? Because
Yeah,
he wants to be weak,
it
supposedly
feels
weak
weak.
and needy. But, that's again also a lie. And we need others
Yeah.
to help us on this journey, and we need others to walk with us for the hard parts and also the good parts.
A friend of mine and I were just talking about how there's even a temptation to wanna be strong even when we're in counseling
Mhm.
or even when we're in, um like, she's going through grief counseling. Like, that's a place to just be messy and be hurt and be sad and be undone. And she's like, "But I still have this temptation and wanna pull it together for the other person." And I'm like, "That's so true."
Mhm.
We wanna be strong even when, there's space for us to show the true emotions. But
Yeah,
it does I am aware that I have this mindset that there's some, weakness. Like, if I can't hold it together, then I'm weak, and so it's a lot to push through in order to get to the other side.
it is. And I think part of that too is that one of the reasons we don't want to be vulnerable and fall apart when we need to, even in spaces that are created for us to do that, like a grief workshop or in counseling, I think is because, well, we're, sent these messages and we've grown up this way. But also, I think that there are many occasions in our childhood where we were needy and we did need something from someone, and it wasn't given to us. And so our bodies learn it's not safe, right? Like, it's not safe to be vulnerable. It's not safe to tell other people what you need. It's not safe to fall apart. You have to hold it together. Right. And so, and again, those messages come through decades, right? For those of us, at this stage in our lives where we're starting to look back for so long, and to undo decades of messaging and programming and, ruts in our brains, like, it takes a lot of work. We don't just say, oh, this is a safe place. I can fall apart here, right? When for 50 years we've been holding it together, right? And so, neuroplasticity is real, which is awesome, but it also takes a lot of time to create those new neural pathways. And it takes practice, right? It takes doing it once and feeling
Mhm.
really awkward and like, vulnerability hangover. Like, I failed. I shouldn't have done that. I shared too much. But being like, no, okay, I can do this again. I was okay afterwards, right? And then doing it again and again. And that's how we build those new neural pathways. But it takes practice and it takes time. And so it makes total sense, right? We'd be in those spaces and we'd be like, I want to fall apart. There's space for me to fall apart, but I
Right.
just can't do it, right?
Yeah. I can remember being in my group at the story workshop, and the leader facilitating the group spoke something just like you heard, you know, he mirrored back what I was telling him, and he said it in a way that I couldn't allow myself to see before because of what that meant, the truth of what it meant to see it for what it was. But I always remembered that, and it
Yeah.
really helped me almost recategorize things in my mind. And so just the impact of that one experience that
Right.
opened up. I went there because I was in the process of writing my story. And I thought, "Oh, this will help me." And I ended up writing my story. I have literally a manuscript. But that's not the story that I'll be sharing publicly. I'm not going to
Mm,
publish that story, but I am publishing the Lioness Rise Up
mm,
book, which is the telling of 12 lioness stories,
right.
which is awesome. So
Yeah.
it's amazing. Tell us, what is your mission now? What are you focused on in this season?
Yeah. So I think, following my own journey and just realizing the incredible healing that's come and that is still to come, and how I long for this to be part of everyone's journey, really. I have a real heart for encouraging women to embrace their stories with courage and curiosity and kindness. Again, I think the messages from the world are the opposite. And also, there's no time and space really in our busy lives to look at ourselves and take time for our own healing. And so I am really passionate about encouraging women and men, but, more staying, with who I am with women and looking at the impact of the wounding of their childhood on their current relationships and their lives right now. Because I think, at least my story was, I think I try to fix from the outside in, right? I try to read the books, get all the advice, listen to friends, mentors, counselors, and then do whatever I needed to do, right? Like, I was trying to fix myself because I knew I was broken. We all are. And I was trying to fix it, but I felt like no matter how hard I tried at doing that, I really couldn't make any traction. I would just find myself straight back where I was. And none of those things seemed to really have any impact. And once I started looking at woundings that I'd had and survival strategies that I'd built to protect myself from those woundings, it started to make so much sense that I was struggling in the way that I was struggling. And I long for other people to find that freedom of, oh, instead of what's wrong with me, that makes total sense, right? To move from we're all broken. We just are. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's no shame in that. And that means that we can move to a space of healing if we're just broken. And and shame would love us to stay in the space of what's wrong with me, because that, paralyzes us, it keeps us stuck, and it doesn't move us towards actively seeking healing and wholeness.
I'm going to plug Kurt Thompson's work. You mentioned him earlier,
Hmm.
and he wrote a book called The Soul of Shame.
Hmm.
And one of my friends is actually reading it for the first time right now. And The Anatomy of the Soul is the other one, correct?
Uh-huh. I
Yeah.
think he's written 4 actually, and then The Soul of Desire and The Place. Oh, I'm not going to remember the book on suffering.
Oh,
Yeah. So there's 4, and they're all incredible. Yeah.
wow. And how are you doing this work? I know you love to encourage women and particularly moms. How are you doing that right now?
Yeah. So I am writing, although that has taken a bit of a back seat. I'm working on a book that is, taking time, and that's okay. I'm realizing it's all part of the process. And that's where this all started, right? And where you and I actually started working together professionally for a while, right? Is where I was like, I feel like I'm being called to write, to encourage others, but I can't put a sentence on a page. And so
Like
writing,
literally.
literally, yeah,
I mean,
like,
you
yeah,
knew you were called to write, and
right.
you what was happening? You weren't able to
Yeah,
write? What was
I,
happening?
I think I felt like I couldn't do it. I was being called to
Believed
do
that
it
was
and
your
I
mindset.
wanted to do it, but I felt like I couldn't do it. I had no self-confidence. I had no belief in myself that I could actually do this thing that I felt like I really wanted to and needed to do. Right. And you encouraged me. You're like, okay, this week, your homework is to write for 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
And I was like, oh, I can do 5 minutes. And oh, that sounds terrifying all at the same time. Right. And so I just wrote for 5 minutes because the pressure of I have to write a book was
So
taken
big.
off. Right. Like, yeah, so big. And it was like, I have to write for 5 minutes. And I was like, I can do that. I can write for 5 minutes. And so I would sit down and put my timer on and write for 5 minutes. And writing for 5 minutes led me to see that I could write for 10 minutes and
Yes.
then that I could write for 30 minutes. Right. And then, I applied for Anne Swindell's writing mastermind called Writing with Grace and was accepted into that, which was just such a sweet open door, and got to work with Anne Swindell and a bunch of other incredible Christian writers for a year. And, that was like somebody holding my hand through this process of, yeah, you can do this. Yeah, you can do this. Um,
I wanna pause you there because I think people are gonna really resonate with that. I mean,
mm,
how many of us have, um, a deep knowing that there's something important for us to do, we actually know what it is. It might be a little fuzzy because we don't have the full
mm,
picture of what it is, but there's like this urge, a compulsion to do something, to make a particular impact, and we hold ourselves back because of fear. And what you were saying is you had a lot of self-doubt, a lot of insecurity about whether or not you even had what it took to
hmm
write, to
yeah.
get the thing done. So what shifted, or what did you need to believe about yourself in
hmm
order to make that shift, even just to show up for 5 minutes for yourself to write?
Yeah. So I think, we all know imposter syndrome is huge, but it really has helped me to realize that everybody has it, right? I thought only I had it, right? It was only me that didn't have what it took and was trying to do something she couldn't do, right? But first of all, realizing, and this is in hindsight, right, that everyone has it and that shouldn't stand in your way. But I honestly think the key, Jen, was not being alone in it.
Yeah.
Again, it was having you initially and then having my mastermind friends and Anne come walk alongside me. And there's accountability there, but there's also people saying, you can do this. I believe in you. And we need that. Again, we don't want it because we think it's weak not to have it in and of ourselves, but we so desperately need that. It is so important. And, so I did that year with Anne, and our group still meets. We're actually going on a retreat next month. We
Oh,
now go on an annual retreat together, and we
oh
have
my god.
monthly Zoom calls. And so we are still in community and we're still encouraging each other through life and through writing. But last year I went to my first writing conference, Write to Publish, and I met lots of wonderful people, but I met 2 women that I really believe I was destined to meet there. And the 3 of us have formed a Marco Polo group that we are on constantly, like weekly, multiple times, sometimes multiple times a day. And we have come alongside one another in the creative space. And so while we're all writers, we're all doing a work that we feel like we've been called to, a work that's meaningful and purposeful, that needs to find its way in the world. But we can't do it alone. And honestly, I will tell you, Jen, just by being in that group, there's no magic and no one's doing my work for me, right? Like, Jenny and Jillian aren't, actually writing anything for me or creating anything for me. But we're coming on that group saying, I feel so lost. This is what I feel like I should be doing. And for some reason, I can't do it. And we'll be like, I hear you. I feel that way too. That's so hard. I wonder if it could be related to this that's happening in your life. Or I wonder if this might be helpful because this helped me a couple of weeks ago. Or I have no answers and I'm just going to cry with you, or I'm just going to hold this for you, or I'm just going to pray with you. And just that journey, like the past year, you asked, what am I doing now? So I was writing and I'm speaking and I'm working on creating a platform for women to find a space where they can start doing this work, right? But, just this past year, I've done so much that I could never have done without their support. And again, also my mastermind support and a few other women that have come alongside me and supported me. And so I will say that I think find people to walk with you, because walking and we cannot do this alone. And we keep thinking we can, right? And it's it's in my moments of greatest despair when I'm like, I can't do this. I have so much to do. There's no way I can do this. And it's because I'm alone in those times. And I need to be like, I need my people. I need my people to remind me what's true, to encourage me in this work that I'm doing, and just to not make me feel alone.
Yeah. I have a Marco Polar team too. It's, daily there's this incredible support that is felt. It's like an energetic change that happens when we are with one another in that way virtually. And I'm sorry, it's actually Voxer. It's not it's a, audio. It's not even
Okay.
video. So
Okay.
there's even less pressure.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
That has been, we marvel almost weekly, we marvel at how important the group is for each of us and how we didn't know. I felt inspired by God to start the group. And I really sat with it for a while because I thought, is this just me or am I really being called to this? And I don't know what their circumstances are, but I did it, out of just of faith and taking a risk. And, we had no idea what would be
Right.
coming in those months that have
Right.
passed since we started, I think in October. And we're just so grateful, just so grateful. And you're right. There's something about being buoyed and not feeling
Mhm.
alone
Yeah.
that is essential. I mean, we're wired that way. We're
Right.
made for it.
Right. Correct.
So, what have you been doing? Tell me more about the speaking and what you're doing through MomCo and Love You as.
Yeah. Yeah. So I, again, have been speaking probably for almost a year and a half now, which again, when you said, I'm like, oh, that sounds so short. And, some people have speaking careers, but I'm like, but no, it's a year and a half. And that feels big from, where I was last spring, where I had not spoken on this ever and didn't feel like I could. And, who would want to hear from me? And I started finding that as I started sharing my story and, this work that I am just so passionate about others doing, that, friends started telling friends and people started telling people and, you know, people just wanted to hear more. And so that's been really encouraging because again, I love being able to share and encourage others. And then and then even better is when you hear people come back and be like, I, listened to that podcast. I took my first step. I started doing this and the impact already has been incredible. And just to know, thank you, Lord, that there is just so much goodness in this work and that other people are hearing about it because of small little steps of obedience and faith on my part. So yes, I've been speaking, and I recently in the spring joined the board of MomCo, which is an organization that I've been a part of for the past 23 years since my son Luke was a baby. And, I started, and it used to be called MOPS for those that are like, what is MomCo? But many of us have heard of MOPS, Mothers of Preschoolers. I went 23 years ago with a 20-month-old toddler, my oldest daughter, and a newborn, my son. And We had just moved to the DC area, and my husband had just been diagnosed with a rare blood disorder that was chronic. And, we were thousands of miles away from any family or home back in South Africa. And so it was a very overwhelming time. And MomCo, again, provided the community that I needed, right? I didn't know it at the time, but I needed people. I needed people to come around me, and I needed to come around people, right? I needed people. And so through the years, have gone from being that bewildered young mom to, being a table leader, and then a mentor mom, then a lead mentor mom, and now on the board. And it's a mission that I couldn't believe in more. I, again, believe in community so strongly, but I also just believe for these young moms, it's such a pivotal time in life, right? Where you're feeling all the things, right? You're feeling, I'm not good enough. I'm a bad mom. There's so much shame. All these things that we feel when we're, need to start taking care of another human being, right? And we feel so inadequate and inept at what we're doing. But to come alongside and say, this is normal. This is what this process is like. This is natural. You are okay. You are doing a great job. And we're here to help you. So, yeah, I couldn't believe in the mission of MomCo more. So I'm loving my work there, just loving that I'm able to, have more impact and, just encourage more moms. And then my work with Love USA, been doing that for the past 16 years now. So my husband, Mickey, and I, before we moved to the US 25 years ago, was supporting the church we were at was supporting financially just the small hospice that had started up for AIDS orphans. Moms and dads were dying of AIDS, and these babies were orphaned. And so there was a nurse that started a hospice to look after these babies until they passed, to give them dignity and care and love, in their last few days. And then with the introduction of antiretroviral drugs, these babies started surviving and started becoming children. And, it presented a new problem, like, what do we do now? And so a children's village called Lily of the Valley was started. And so our church supported them back then. And then we moved to the US and found out that there was another South African family that had come and that had established a US nonprofit supporting this ministry. And we were like, okay, it's just undeniable that we need to get involved here. And so we started the East Coast chapter. The other family lived on the West Coast. And so we started the East Coast chapter of Love USA and have had fundraisers for we'll have our 16th one in November. And it's also just been an incredible joy to be involved in that, to see children thrive from, talk about trauma, from the most traumatic circumstances that you could ever imagine. But these children are being loved and cared for and educated and, ushered into adulthood and are finding jobs and community and making a difference when they would have just been abandoned and probably, died or, had a terrible life story going forward. So yeah, it's also just a work that I feel extremely passionate about.
I want to ask you about each of those. So, how has being part of love impacted you? How has it changed you?
That's a great question. I think it has made me see God with new eyes because, again, while we all have trauma and we all have problems and we all have issues day to day, these children have nothing and they have no one. They're orphaned. And to see that God takes care of them, they've done nothing, right? To see that, we read in the Bible, right, that God takes care of the sparrows and the lilies. And so why would we worry about care for ourselves, or we do? But to actually see that, like, come to life in these children's lives, to see that there's a God who sees them, even if they don't see him, who comes in and he takes care of them, and he can take care of them through people that live 8,000 miles away, right on the other side of the world. It has just really expanded my view of God. And it reminds me, I didn't do it very effectively, but when I remember to not worry, and to trust that God has me. And even through the hard things in my story, right, that God has a plan and a purpose for those, and he allows them for reasons that I don't understand. And I may never understand this side of heaven, right? But, you and I have spoken about this before, that there are so many of my hard parts of my story that I'm like, God, can you just take this away? Like, I don't want this anymore. Can you please, you are capable. I know you can just take this away. And I would dearly love if you did that because this is causing me so much pain and anxiety right now. And most often, almost always, he hasn't taken it away in the way that I wanted him to. But then I can look back and I can be like, of course you didn't take that away. Why would you have? Look what you've done with it. Look what you've done in my life. You've made me start to realize parts of my story that I never wanted to acknowledge. I never wanted to go back into that pain. Who wants to feel pain, right? But we don't feel pain, right? We go back into those painful parts of our story to realize that we are not alone, that there is a God that loves us and cares for us and wants our wholeness and wants us connected to Him and wants us to be more like Him. And so I think my work through love has really made me see that in ways that I wouldn't see that in my own life, right? Because my own life looks very different to the children in the villages. But I can so clearly see God there, so clearly. And it's a real gift.
I'm thinking about the compassion and the generosity that comes from going through things. That
Hmm.
if we I guess it's if we allow ourselves to move through it and find some level of healing and not get stuck in it, then it actually transforms us and we're able to give out of the places where we were comforted,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
Like, I think about that with you being a young mom and what you received through that, you are now giving out of
Mm,
having received. And then with these orphans, you understand what pain feels like. You understand what it feels like to be lost, abandoned, bewildered, uncertain, insecure. Um, and I can only imagine that your experiences are why you want to give,
mm,
why your heart is compelled to want to care for these little ones and big ones, as they
right.
age.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think there's a lot of truth in that. And I think that, yeah, we can't just get compassion, right?
Right.
It's not just something that we purchase or
It's not natural.
obtain, right? Yeah, it goes against every grain of our bodies, right? Because as much as we need community, we also want for ourselves, right? And there is a survival element in that, right? But yeah, compassion is not something that we are, I think, in a fallen world naturally wired for.
Yeah.
But it is something that suffering and struggle and pain allow us to have.
I'm also thinking about you as a young mom. I guess you said it was how old were you when you had your first
I
child?
was 26 when I had my first, so I was 28 when I
Yeah,
came on.
okay. And understanding the state that you would have been in at that time, lost, wondering how to care for these little kids. And you probably never could have believed or even imagined that you would be on the other side of that helping young moms
Mhm.
at that time, being a mentor, being a leader, now being on the board. And it makes me think about that the long journey of faithfulness that we never know where it's going to lead us. But wow, it can be a really beautiful opening of what we never expected.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I don't think I could. I mean, you're right. I could never have imagined that, over 2 decades later that this would be where I was,
Being on the
right?
board,
Yeah. I mean, what an honor, and yeah, it was just totally not on my radar, right? And I mean, A, because I didn't think that I would ever be able to do that, right, or get to that point. But also, B, I just think I was so lost, and I really was just trying to survive at the time, right? And, it is interesting to look back, in times where you felt like you were struggling so badly and you felt like the world was going to end or you were never going to make it or you were going to make a total hash of whatever you were in, right? To look back at those times and be like, oh, wow, God carried me through. I walked through that part of my story, not in ways that I thought I would, but in ways that was so much better. And I think as that young mom, control was a big survival strategy for me. If I could just control what was in my little world, I would be okay. So as a young mom, I think I was like, if I can just gain control over my kids and this mothering thing, right? If I could just make it comfortable, or if I could just have a handle on it, if I could understand it enough to be doing a good enough job, then I'm going to be okay, right? And so that was my goal at the time, right? Was to just be a good mom, or a surviving mom first and then a good mom if I could, if I could try that. But the ways I was trying to do that were not the ways that I needed to. And I think if I had just been given a manual and told, okay, you need to do XYZ, I would have done XYZ and checked off the boxes and just carried on. But instead, I had to learn the hard way, right? I had to learn because things were painful. I had to learn that you cannot control your children. You cannot control anyone in this world, right? I had to learn those hard lessons that when things felt so out of control, when there is a baby that's crying for seemingly no reason for hours and hours on end in the middle of the night when you haven't slept for months, like there is no control there at all. Right. And it's realizing from those times, like I needed to go through those though, to realize that God was there for me, that I was going to be okay. And that this was not the end of the world. I could survive this and, walk with this community, albeit tired and bewildered and overwhelmed. But that taking those steps day by day, I got to the point where I was like, okay, yeah, I'm progressing on this journey, and I don't have I'm not the perfect mom, and I don't have the perfect kids, and we're not the perfect family. But that's not the goal, right? I mean, I think I really needed to learn too that my goals were all wrong too, right? I was striving for the wrong things. And I wanted God just to give me what I needed and to answer my prayers as I wanted them answered so that I could just move on to the next thing. I didn't even know what that next thing was, right? But I just needed to master the stage and get through it, and then we would all be okay. But that's not how it works, right? We all know that. And it's the process that has been the most incredible, right? Where I have grown the most, learned the most, become more compassionate, become kinder, become more humble, realized how sinful I am, learned to ask for forgiveness. All those things, right? Those were the really important things. I didn't know it at the time.
What is the goal if it's not to survive and to control others?
Yeah, I think the goal as a believer is to become more like God, to become more like Jesus, to let him do his work in us, to be connected to him in a very deep, vulnerable, honest way, and to pour out from those places, right? And to be obedient to what he calls us to trust that he has us. And so I think the overflow of staying close to him and of trusting that whatever comes our way, right, is part of his plan for us, and that we're going to be okay through it. And I think the goal is to trust him, to become
Yeah.
more like him, to stay close to him. And again,
It's
I think
it's
I
sort
had
of
it the wrong way around. Yeah.
it's the opposite of what we do. We try to
Yep.
control when it
Totally.
actually requires surrendering.
Correct.
I am very clear that there's only one who is worthy of surrendering to, and that is God.
Hmm. Yeah.
There's only one who's worthy of our full trust,
Right. Yeah.
and that is him.
Yeah.
I think sometimes women can get it a little twisted where we can surrender, submit to everybody around us and lose
Yeah.
ourselves.
Yeah.
And really, it's God that we are
Right.
ultimately to
Right.
obey and surrender to and ultimately listen to. And it's always better than our own plan anyway.
Always better. Always better. Not necessarily more comfortable or less
No,
painful or prettier, but always
but
better.
way more pregnant with purpose, right?
Right. Right. And again, I don't think that I don't think, I know we don't succeed on this side of heaven, right? It's a process that continues until our time is up. And we all know how much work there still is to do in each one of us, right? It's, yeah, real baby steps.
So, what would you tell moms to encourage them in whatever season they are in, whatever age they are, and whatever age their kids are? What would you want them to know?
One of the main things that I have really learned and long to communicate with other moms is that it's never too late. And I think that comes out of part of my story where my kids were in their teens when I started doing this work, right? And so I now have three young adults and I still have one child at home. But I felt like, oh, I totally missed it, right? Like my kids are teens when I'm starting this work. So by the time I, made any traction or there is any benefit to this healing work that I've done, they've left home. And then it's too late, right? Because their time at home is done and I failed. And I felt that very deeply. And I still do at times. I still regret at times. But I'm learning to steer that regret and that guilt to God as redemption, no matter where we are in our lives. And it is never too late because what it's meant in my story is as I've discovered things, I'm now able to go back to my grown kids and to say, hey, I have realized that this is something that I did when you were growing up. And I am so sorry. Will you forgive me? And again, I don't do this perfectly. I don't do it all the time. I don't do it, when I should sometimes, but I'm doing it more. And and that's okay. And that's goodness, right? Is to be able to still go back. And I just listened to was part of a webinar on Saturday with Dan Allender and Adam Young, who are two, of the best voices in story work right now. And both of them were just sharing, right? You continue this work with your kids. There's no, your kids have left the house. Like it's just your parenting just transitions to a different form, right? And you still have great influence. And I firmly believe and trust that even in these actions now when my kids have left home, that it still has impact.
Yeah.
Because I've seen some of my children come back to me and start saying things to me like, hey, I want to tell you this thing that I did that I felt like I couldn't tell you at the time, but I want to tell you now and I'm really sorry. Will you forgive me? And it's moments like that where I'm like, okay, like perfection is not the goal. And I don't even want it anymore because the
Ah,
beauty that comes through moments like that is so much better and sweeter than having done it right the first time. Because I can actually, again, just like the children of love, I can see God's hand in it, right? Because none of that would be possible without Him, right? Because that's God working, right? Because where else do you get to mess up so miraculously, right? Just so fully, and then have something good come out of it,
right?
right? That's just not the economy of the world. That's not
No.
how it works, right? You
Right.
mess up and you get failure. That's how, that's the economy of the world. And so it's allowed me to see God so much more clearly. And then also to see Him as my parent through moments like that. Um, it's just really been a sweet journey. So I really long for moms to know that it's never too late. So if you have a 2-year-old and you're like, oh my goodness, those first 2 years of formative development I failed at, and now like I'm all lost. Nope, not too late at that point. And if you have an 18-year-old
Right.
and they've left home, it's not too late. And if you have a 40-year-old and you're like, it's too late, it is not too late because God is in the work of redemption. It's what He does, it's who He is. He can't do anything but that. It's what He does. And so
Is
I just
this
encourage you. Yeah.
is it rare? What you're describing sounds rare to me. That where there is this kind of dialogue between parents and children about forgiveness, about admitting wrongs, taking responsibility, being accountable once it's realized. Because most of us, I think the tendency is to just bury it. Like, we don't want to feel it. We don't want to expose ourselves anymore. Do you find that moms are doing this?
Yeah, I don't think it's common, but I guess since I started doing this work and I'm in these circles more, I do hear it happening and it's beautiful. And it is hard. Like it's not natural. We spoke about compassion not being natural, saying that we're wrong and asking for forgiveness. And not just once, but over and over again. That's not
Yeah.
natural either, right? It's not what we want to do. But I think you were speaking earlier about what the goal is. If the goal is to become more like Jesus and we are becoming more like Him, then this becomes easier. And I don't know that it'll ever be easy, but it becomes easier. The first time is really hard. Um, like really hard. I remember a few years ago over the Easter table at our house, I felt like God was, it was really when I was, just starting to bear some of the fruit and realizing some of what this story work would take of me. And I felt like God was calling me to ask forgiveness of my children for things that I had done that had hurt them growing up. And I didn't want to do that. Who wants to do that? A couple of my kids were in college at the time and they were going to be home for Easter. So they weren't home that often. So this was the time, right? Because I didn't have everyone around the table all the time anymore. And so this was going to be the time. And, leading up to it, I was like, no, I don't need to do it. That's okay. I don't need to do it. These mental wars that we play. I'm like,
Right.
yeah, no, I'm off the hook. That's okay. And I'd feel good for about 5 minutes. And then I'd be like, no, I really need to do this. And just like that weight of, yeah, this is a good thing. This is right. This is what you need to do. And so I played that, for weeks in my head. And then that Easter day came and we were having lunch and I was like, yeah, I need to, and I also want to do this, right? I need to, and there's a part of me that really wants to do this. And that's what I was saying. I think it's that part that is becoming more like Jesus, right? I'm like, I actually think I really want to do this. Because when I said to them, I was like, hey guys, I would like to tell you something. And of course, everyone is hushed around the table because what's mom going to tell them now, right? Are we going to go on like some family bonding experience? Are we going to, cook up some new dessert together to, again, bond and be together because we're not together that much? And I was just like, I need to ask forgiveness for ways that I've hurt you. And my husband protectively looked at me and was like, you don't need to do this. And I was like, I know, I want to do this. And so I went from, one child to the other. And I was like, I recognize that I really wounded you and hurt you. For my son, for example, by not letting you be who you are. I always wanted you to be this neat, tidy guy, right? I wanted you to dress in khakis and polo shirts and have a neat haircut. And Luke, he's the most incredible guy who has tattoos and
It's a
wears his
little bit more
fishing
rugged.
gear and is really rugged and loves the outdoors and has his long hair. And that's who God made Luke to be, right? Like that is Luke being honest to who he was created to be. But that didn't make me feel comfortable, right? That was not a way that I felt in control. And so I kept trying to shape him into somebody else. And I asked him to forgive me for that. It was a few sentences, but I mean the impact of what I was asking him to forgive me of is his entire life, is things that I'm gonna have to go back to over and over again, right? Little moments over and over again. But I finished saying that to all my kids and I had tears in my eyes. It was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. It was one of the most glorious things I've ever done. And I wish I could have bottled that up. Again, because there I was admitting how I had failed,
Mm.
and yet it was beautiful,
How did they
right?
respond? Well, I remember you describing this like I can see you around the table.
Yeah, they were gracious, they were each in their own way. They were like, "That's okay." Or, and again, these wounds are deep. So it's not like, "Hey, I'm sorry I nudged you walking over to the table." "Oh, that's okay." Right? Like that's an easy, "That's okay." Right? These were big things. And these were things that, again, I'm going to have to be doing repair work on for a long time, if not forever, on this side of heaven, right? And so I couldn't have them just be like, oh, that's great, mom. Thank you so much. We're good, right? Like I wasn't looking for that. But it was the first step, right? It was the first step in saying, I acknowledge that I have deeply hurt you and that that has impacted you. I am so sorry for that. Will you forgive me? Um, And we will keep coming back to this again and again. And I didn't say that part right,
Yeah.
but I hope that they know that and have seen that since. But yeah, again, they were all gracious to forgive me that day. And, I think it was a bit of a shock. No one knew it was coming, right? I knew it was coming. I'd been preparing for weeks, but they didn't know it was coming. Yeah. So again, you asked, is it normal? You know, I don't think everyone's doing this, but I do believe because God is working that this is
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah.
And I firmly believe that, again, like I said, I was trying to read the books and do everything from the outside and control and try to get to be this great mom and have these great kids. And that was not the way to get there, right? Realizing the way to get there was to start working through my own pain and realize that because of my own pain, I had inflicted a lot of pain on my own kids.
I'm realizing too that you had to do your own work first
Hmm.
before you had the capacity to
Correct.
be there for your kids in a new way.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, the airplane oxygen mask analogy,
Yeah,
it's vital. I mean, we can't give from what we don't have.
exactly.
We're not able to as much as we want to, right? And we may see other people do it,
Cry
we may
in your
hear
own
other people
street.
do it. You may hear this today and be like, "I wanna do that," and that is incredible. But don't I think it's unfair to yourself to be like, "I'm gonna do this tomorrow," and maybe you have done the work and you need to take that next step, right, of asking your kids for forgiveness. But probably you need to do this deep work in yourself first so that you have the overflow to start giving from.
How is that? So if women are listening and are like, "Yep, I've got more work to do," which we all do. Where do they start?
Mhm,
Where do they do this work?
mhm. It reminded me of your question reminded me of a question someone asked when I was speaking once, and they were like, "So, how long does this work take?" And I was like, "I so wish I could answer you. I wish I could tell you it's 2 years and then you will be done," or even it's 5 years and then you can check that box and you will be done. But again, there is no time limit, right? This work is, I think, a way of life that we start. And so I don't think there's an endpoint, but there are certainly like beautiful markers along the way of healing. And it's not like you have to do all the work and then only you reap some of the rewards and the benefits, right? I think it happens all the way through. And so how do you start? I think you start acknowledging that you have pain and that you have been wounded. And we live in a world that, again, mitigating pain is billion-dollar industry, right? That's where people make a lot of money. It's like, yeah, 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 you're hurt here, take this. You're hurting here, take this. You don't have to look at that part. Take this, right? So I think it's acknowledging actually I have wounding and I have pain and that's okay. That doesn't mean there's something wrong with me. That doesn't mean I failed. So I think the first step is acknowledging that you have pain. And believe it or not, that is a huge step because we've spent so long trying to stuff and numb and push aside this pain and say, I'm okay. Pull up my bootstraps, throw my big girl panties. I'm going to be okay. I can survive this. So acknowledging your pain, I think, is the first step. And I think the second step is finding community. And that'll look different for everyone. Um, whether that means you find a counselor or you find a mentor or a pastor or a group of friends where you're like, we're going to start doing this work together. We don't know what this is, but we know that it's worthy, holy work, and we need to do it. There are multiple good books and podcasts that you can find on my website, that point you to where do I start? How do I even find out more about what this journey of embracing my own story looks like? So I think you start reading. And again, I think reading is a tool in this space, but it's not reading to fix. It's reading to move along on this journey. And, you have to do it with kindness and compassion to yourself. And we spoke about compassion earlier. We don't naturally have it. And one of the main people we don't naturally have it for is ourselves,
Mhm.
right? If we were to listen to our self talk, we would see that very quickly. I'm so stupid. How did I do that again? Why can't I learn? Look at me do it again. I'm never going to make it. Like there's no hope for me, right? If we start listening, we realize that there's very little self compassion. And so we need to start having compassion for ourselves. And a big way to do that is in community, right? Where we
Yeah.
see other people have compassion for us.
Yes.
And then we can stop being like, oh, that makes so much sense. Like this part of me that I hated, of course it's there because it needed to protect something so painful. And other people are helping me see that that thing was so big that now I'm able to have compassion for myself in that space, right? So find community. And then you start going into specific stories, right? Because we all have a, 60,000-foot view where we're able to look down on our lives and be like, oh, yes, this was my family growing up. An alcoholic father and, my mom died and this happened. And so, we tell those kind of stories, the big overview, aerial view stories all the time, but we're not really connected emotionally to that huge overview story. But when we start telling stories, and this is what, that story workshop in Denver did all those years ago, right? You start telling the small stories where you start remembering, like, I remember the shoes I was wearing. I love those shoes. You start feeling that love for those shoes. And as you start feeling that love for those shoes, you remember, I was wearing those shoes the day that X happened, or, the uncountable time that my dad did X, right? And so you start connecting emotionally. And that's when you start, touching the pain and touching those parts that you've stuffed for so long. And then it's a cycle. You keep going through that process with people around you, and the work happened.
There's, I've been thinking about the pain and how when we feel the emotional pain, we tend to distract ourselves, right? We want to move to something else, be productive, something that can grab our attention so that we can move along
Right.
and not have to deal with the pain. And my recommendation would be to stay with the pain,
Mhm.
be present with our own emotions and get curious about them.
Right, totally.
What is this is hurting?
Mhm.
What is that?
Yeah,
Where's that coming from? What triggered that?
right.
How
Why
would
does
I
this feel
name this
familiar?
emotion?
Yeah,
Is this sadness? Is this anger? Is this insecurity? Is this being able to name our emotions is a great start.
totally, totally. And I will say, I think we need other people, and
Yeah.
that feels very scary. But, we've been pushing these emotions down for so long
Yeah.
that they are sometimes unrecognizable to us, right? We can't even recognize that, oh, that is anger. Like, oh, I
Exactly.
had a right to be angry at my dad because he was so narcissistic and he gaslit us. Like that is anger, but I was never
Yeah.
allowed to feel anger, so I don't know what anger is. I don't know that pain is anger, right? And that anger needs to come out, right? Our bodies store it, even though our brains are very sophisticated and can numb pain to help us survive.
Yeah.
Our bodies remember. There's a great book by Bessel van der Kolk called "The Body Keeps the Score." Our bodies remember. And we need to work through that, right? It's because our bodies remember that we keep getting triggered, that we feel like we have the same patterns over and over again, right? There's a reason that we can't just behavior modify from the outside in,
Right.
right?
Right.
Why
Try
we
as you
have to go
might.
from the inside out, right? Why we
Yes.
have to work it out from the inside, why we have to realize where the knots are and start untangling them and
Yeah.
tracing the threads.
When you're speaking, what is your message?
My
Not
message
key
is,
key
yeah, my message is there is hope. And there is healing, and it comes from embracing our stories. And I encourage you to do this work. And that I have found just great healing and wholeness and connectedness through embracing my story and not through continuing to stuff it. So yeah, it's really
Right.
encouraging women and those that I speak to start doing this work because I believe it's vital and it's just so good. It's hard work. Not gonna let anyone think, "Oh, okay, yeah, let me just embark on this process and we'll just fix everything." Like, it's hard work,
It
but it's
is.
good work. And, one very wise counselor told me once, "You're already doing hard." You know? We don't realize that. You're already doing hard by stuffing, by trying to manage the triggers, by trying to survive, by feeling depressed. So you're already doing hard by trying to manage what your body is trying to contain. So
Choose
you're
your
really
heart.
just trading for a new hard, right? It's like, can you choose a new hard? Yes, it's going to be uncomfortable because it's not familiar to you.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard because you have to start those new neural pathways. It's going to be awkward. Yes, all the things, but it's just a new hard. And that new hard's destination is so much better than the old hard that you're currently doing.
Wow. A friend of mine calls this work the hard and the holy.
Yeah.
You use that language too. It's hard and it's
Yeah.
holy. It's
Yeah.
holy work. It's worthy work.
Absolutely.
This is the lioness in you.
Mm.
that's doing this work and has done this work. It's the courage, the bravery, the resiliency, the faithfulness to the journey, the commitment. That's your lioness energy showing up for yourself and for your family and all of these people that you're serving through your volunteer work.
Thanks, Jen.
Yeah. So, how can people find you and learn more about your own story and
Yeah.
these resources that you have on the website?
Yeah. So you can find my website. It's michellekonson.com. Very easy. It helps when you have an unusual last name. So yeah, head to my website and you can find those resources there. You can also sign up for my newsletter, and then you can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Michelle Konson. I mean, it's Konson. But yeah, that's where I am. And you can also request me to come and speak to your group over there. I would love to do that.
Yeah. Beautiful. Keep doing the work. I can't wait to read your book, Michelle. And we're on the journey together, right?
Yeah.
We're taking each brave step. Every day there's something that
Hmm.
requires us to have courage and commitment to I know there's more on the other side of
Yeah.
this and to
Yeah. Thanks,
persevere
Jen.
through it.
Yeah.
So
Thank
you're
you.
doing great
And
work.
yeah, it's really, for us to be able to reflect on how we met
Yeah.
and just where we are
Yeah.
almost 10 years later and to see the fruits of that work.
Yes.
How beautiful, right? None of us could ever have imagined this
No. And there's
at the
more.
time. And
There's
there's
more.
more,
That's
right? Right.
That's the exciting part is, like, we're
Yeah.
just getting started. We've
Yeah.
come so far, and yet there's always more that God has
Yeah.
for us.
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
There's always hope.
Yeah. There is.
Thank you for sharing, Michelle.
Yeah, of course, Jen. It's been a real honor and a pleasure.
Well, until the next time, the lioness in me sees the lioness in you.